Enlightened assholes. You really, really intimidate me.
The beheaded man. They're carrying the head.
No, I think it's a lie. There's no future self.
Hello, good morning and good evening. Good morning for those of us who are in the US, because my next guest is in the US. And good evening for those of us who are on the other side of the world, uh, in Asia and other places. Um, Today, I have someone who's a close friend, dear friend. I met this guy some 1.5 years ago or something, and three trainings and several conversations later, here we have my amazing, amazing friend, Mr. Mickey Feher. Hello. I get the applause every time for my guests, so I make sure. Hey, how are
Hello.
you?
I'm doing well. Hello, Adnan, and hello, everybody. Good to see you all. Good to feel you. Like I don't really see you, but I can feel you that you're there.
Yeah, yeah. And the feeling is, as we all know, it that's the first thing that we actually see, actually really encounter. Oh God, I'm too visual nowadays. So yeah, the kinesthetic basically needs to come alive. So Mickey, I mean, in my very short introduction, because I don't like to dwell on it while you're waiting. I was just mentioning that 1.5 years ago, I dropped you a message on LinkedIn, asked you about mindset maps, and it's been what, three trainings and several conversations later. Here we are, good friends, and I think we've covered quite a bit of journey, and there's a lot more to go. So thank you for being here and being part of this podcast.
It's good to be here. It's good to be here. And I enjoyed our conversations always. So I trust that this will be another good, authentic, and deep conversation like we always have.
Yes. Are you standing?
I am. I am. I like standing. And yeah, it
So
kind of
what
goes to, yeah, go ahead.
or what's the I mean, I have always noticed that you're standing and those trainings have been long, man. And you've somehow, had the patience and the stamina to stand for like hours. How does that work?
Yeah, that's interesting. I think it's related to the idea that, screens often separate people, but screens can also connect people like it connects us and everyone else who's ever listening to this. And when you're together with somebody and you are there physically, then you're often standing. I mean, not always, but it often is the case. And for me, when you're standing, there is more just energy in the place, in the room, in my body. And
Yeah,
I used to be a very head only guy, like always up in my head. And somebody told me, get the heck out of your head. So I'm dropping into my body, and standing is a way of being in the body. Yeah.
yeah. And I hear this a lot. I see this a lot also in my coaching conversations and in my trainings as well. People come with a lot of head only thing. The rest of the body is missing. It's like those we had this horror novels, back in my childhood, where they used to say, the beheaded man, and he would be carrying like that. Somehow, when I
Yeah.
look at people, sometimes it's like they're carrying the head, and in fact, the head is only just moving around. What's up with that?
Yeah. I mean, it's a metaphor, right? That everything is a metaphor for something. But I think, we used to say that this is a Western issue, that people are stuck in their head, but it's not at all true. It's
Yeah,
interesting. I have traveled to many places and trained in many places, like in Asia, China, Japan, Malaysia, Singapore, Australia. And also, I had lots of clients in India, and I worked with you in Pakistan, and everybody's stuck in their head. It's not a Western thing. It's more a performance thing. Like performance, you think it's happening up here. So you have to concentrate and you have to get like, yeah, let's get it right. So that's all in the head. it does get to the body, like I'm showing it that it does, but we're not aware, or we don't think that matters. But it's a system. So if I loosen the body, it loosens the mind. If I loosen the mind, it can loosen the body, as we know.
Yeah, yeah. How did you loosen it?
Well, it's a good question. It's I guess the first question is, how did I ever figure out that it's not loose? And interestingly, it was a very physical experience. I was training in Kung Fu, Chinese martial art, and my Sifu, my coach, was always telling me, because when I was, so you're supposed to be in this body position to
Yeah,
protect your head, right? So
yeah,
there's a little bit of like constriction there, but you're not supposed to do it. I always thought that it's actually tense, but it's not. It's supposed to be very loose and very flexible, because if I tense up my muscles, hitting and moving is changing. So it's actually very hard to be effective. So he kept saying loose, loose, loose. And then I began to realize that, not only during kung fu practice I do this, but I tend to do this a lot otherwise. And then, practices like meditation, like kung fu, like just conscious breathing, things like that began to help me to loosen up.
and ultimately, um, what was that jump that you had to take? I mean, I know
Yeah.
that
Mhm.
head to heart is there's this there's this jump that you have this leap that you have to make.
Yeah, you see, that's interesting, because I don't think so. So like, we are always looking for, okay, so what was the one thing that you did, or the three things you did, and then suddenly everything changed. And it's actually much more gradual, I think. It's like little micro practices of trying to do something looser. Even like now, like, okay, let's not forget to breathe while I'm talking to you, right? Like, just kind of noticing that maybe we are, or I am already kind of in that let's charge kind of stage, right? And so it wasn't there wasn't like one jump. It was more like this ongoing little practice, which begins to change you. And then it's a lifelong journey. Like, I still catch myself, like standing in a way that I don't like to stand,
Yeah,
and sort of just adjusting. I catch myself, I'm getting excited, like slow down, breathe a little bit. And that's how it works. That's how it works for me.
yeah. I I also ask because I mean I do have a Sufi background, and when I was going into the meditative journey in the process, it was, and back in that time, I was, all in my head. I was working for a multinational, an American company, data, process, system, and everything. And it's all head, right? So when my mentor said, well, you have to meditate and just start with 5 minutes, I couldn't sit for like 2 minutes. And after 2 minutes, I'd look at my watch like this and I'd say, it's still 2 minutes. When will the 5 minutes happen? So I understand the that's the gradual step. Uh, but I've typically found in my practice with others as well that people with a lot of head brain, they run away from that mind body connection mostly.
Yeah.
Uh, I wonder what's really going on.
Well, many years ago, actually, it may have been like 8 years ago, I was doing a training for GE, which was, and probably still is, one of the largest companies in the United States. And it was a very international group. We had like 100 people in the room, and there were actually people from India and Pakistan and other Asian countries where supposedly meditation is a common practice. And there I
Yeah.
was standing, the white guy, and and telling
What do you
people,
know about meditation?
yeah,
That kind of stuff.
It's like, like you gave us this gift, so let me give it back to you now. And so these were all leaders, like hard charging, very sort of like MBA graduates, and they have achieved a leadership level. And they were there partially because, this course was supposed to re-energize people who were in some sort of a burnout phase. And one of them walked up to me and she said, like, wow, I always thought meditation wasn't for me, but we did this mindfulness exercise together, just kind of conscious breathing. And then I think it was a mental rehearsal or visualization of going to the sweet spot. So this idea that there's a place where you can be safe and you can always get back to that place, and sort of imagining a journey. It wasn't inside because it's too much of a jump. I took them on a journey to the sweet spot. And and I think she sort of discovered that it just didn't occur to me that this has any relationship to health or performance or work. It was always something that, some people do this for some reason, for some other place, but that's not for me. So people just don't think that, apart from skills and competencies and willpower, there is more to performance. They're extremely focused on those three.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And it's interesting that you also still, not still, but you also have uh, a program called Mindset Maps, which supposedly sounds like very mind oriented, very head brain oriented. But I know that it's not. But why mindsets? Why not um, the whole body set or soul set or something?
Right. Yeah. So, there's this quote from an American poet. Her name is Mary Oliver, and she's asking. It's like a question in a poem, and I think that is kind of my big question in life. But you might find that it's your question too, and many other people's question. So the question is, tell me what it is you plan to do with your own wild and precious life. So tell me what it is that you plan to do with your own wild and precious life. So
Yeah,
that's the question, like when I woke up, so to speak, when I was, let's say, 16 or 15, that was the question I was asking myself. So I got this wild and precious thing, which seems, amazing sometimes and very hard at other times. And what am I to do with this? Like, what the hell am I supposed to do? And so that question of, okay, so how do I make sense of any of this? Like, what's the meaning? Why am I here? Why would I care? Why would I care to study? Why would I care to have a job? All of those questions. Why would I care to have a relationship? So I have always been like really interested in this question, and I saw that everybody's asking the question. Most people pretend to know the answer, or they lie, or they, like, pre- prefer to forget the question, but it's everybody's question, right?
yeah,
And so all of this kind of leads to this idea that, okay, I don't especially believe that there is one big meaning in the world, which, you know, it's like one meaning for everyone, and we all have to just kind of adhere to that meaning. I sort of tend to believe, but I respect if somebody that believes that, out of like religious purposes. I sort of tend to feel like we need to create our meaning. Otherwise, there's the danger that there is no meaning. And
yeah,
even if we don't want to, like look at it on a religious level, just on the level of us talking right here, or a manager or a leader talking to somebody to a colleague at work, like we are constantly making meaning. Like, I'm making meaning of your reactions. I have certain predictions. So it doesn't matter whether I want to do this or not, my brain is doing it. So my brain is doing my mind. My brain is directing my attention. My brain is predicting certain things. So if that's the case, then this is kind of the most important thing to get clear on, like to be in charge of, is my own brain, my own mind. And how can I be in charge of that? And why are so many people on autopilot and not in charge of it? And is there a way to figure out some kind of a methodical process to be more in charge of our minds so that we can influence what's going on? Because otherwise it influences us. So that's where, that's how or why I gravitate to mindset, because it seems to matter most. Because if the only way for me to have this conversation with you is to use my mindset, my mind, my brain, and if I'm going to, make a lot of predictions, then why not be conscious of those predictions, and why not create a frame that allows us to have the best possible conversation that we could ever have? So that's how I think about it.
Yeah, I do know, but let me still put it up. We're on the one side we're talking about the mind body connection, and on the other side we're talking about the mindset specifically, right? So maybe someone who's listening, but I've been through the, the entire 9 yards with you. So, but if someone who's listening, uh, how would you say that this still
Mm,
bridges the connection, or let's say upgrades the connection, so to say, this
right.
entire idea that you're talking about?
Yeah. So, you can arrive at this question from many different angles, like from a very scientific, neuroscientific point of view, or from a more kind of practical point of view. But, the basic idea is, from a scientific point of view, is that we all know that our brain is made of neurons, and those neurons, we say that they create these pathways. So they start firing together, and once they start firing together, they start wiring together. So they become more like uh, fixed structures, pathways, which can never be undone. But the good news is that your brain is always changing, so you can rewire it by creating new pathways, but you cannot undo the pathways that you have already created, which is why it's so important to be conscious of what's going on in your brain, because you're constantly wiring yourself to be in a certain kind of way. And when you do it for the first time, it's just one thing, but when you keep doing it, you're practicing it, so you're strengthening it. So it's kind of like a muscle, so it becomes stronger. So if you keep thinking negative thoughts about somebody, and you keep running that little movie in your head every time you see that person, it becomes like um, a self-fulfilling prophecy. So you don't even have to, like, nothing needs to happen, and you're already back to that place, to that dark place that you have with this one person, which is often the breakthrough for people when they realize that, wow, like, I'm actually making this happen. I mean, they are a part of it, and they did something at some point, but they're no longer doing it. Probably they're not doing it at all right now, but I'm, in my mind, I'm making it up again, and it's seems to be happening. So the interesting news is that, okay, so the brain, those neurons are here, but they're also in the heart nervous system and in the gut nervous system. So we have this system of neurons, and the good news is that, yes, the brain is a predictive machine. So in a way, it predicts certain things which are almost automatic, and I'm not fully in charge of that. But the other part of that is that if I start using it, treating it as a muscle, and I began to pay really much more conscious attention to my way of being in a certain place, and my feelings and my thoughts as we're having this conversation, I can begin to change my future self. So that's why we say that, the future is actually created in the now. It's
Yeah.
happening now. Like the way I am here is going to influence how I'm going to be in some other podcast conversations that are coming in the future. So you are the creator, not the creator, but the narrator of your mind, right? Like you can. I didn't create my muscles. I got it as a gift, and maybe it's from God, maybe it's from nature. I got it as a gift, but what I do with it, it's up to me.
Yeah.
It's up to you.
Yeah. Yeah. And therefore, I mean, if I were to, someone asked me this question, and you eloquently, really put it there. But yes, the idea ultimately goes on to that, you just don't have the head brain, right? There is your heart brain, there is your gut brain, and these are all part of the entire mindset, so to say, that are really taking you in that bright place or that dark place, and you can either
Yeah.
be like this or like this, and that's the entire idea. Yeah. uh Go on, you were saying something.
Yeah, I was going to say that. Yeah. So that's kind of more the scientific side of why that's so important. But from a very practical point of view, like each of us, the two of us having this conversation, we could just go inside now and check with ourselves for a moment, and you could and this could happen in an instant, and this could be something that all of our listeners do as well. That okay, I'm listening to Adnan. I probably know him from somewhere. He posted this, podcast, and I don't know who Mickey is, or maybe I do know, and I was curious, so I came here. So sort of like there's a bunch of facts that are in play here, right?
Yeah.
But then you could ask yourself the question like, what's the story? What's the story that I'm telling myself about this? So we probably each tell some kind of a little story in our head about this conversation, and all of the people that are listening, they're like, "Oh, okay, so he's like that. He's from there. Okay, he did that. Okay, he mentioned G. Oh, I know someone at G." So suddenly you have a little story in your head that you kind of like made up and created about Mickey and Adnan and this conversation, and this conversation is for, you know,
That's making. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. So I think like a very simple, practical habit that you can begin as of right now, and then do it forever, is to check with the story. Like, okay, so what's going on? What are the facts? And what's the story I'm telling myself? And so you start by just checking with your own story, but then you could actually share the story. So you could say like, hey, I wanted to share with you, we've been having this conversation for the last 10, 15 minutes, and here's the story I'm telling myself about what's happening. And that could be like really interesting, because then you could respond to that, and we could like compare stories, and maybe we would find that, hey, we need to adjust something. And it's not necessarily about us right now, but
Yeah.
like in a relationship, in a with a boss, in a meeting, after a meeting, when you're debriefing on something that went really well or something that really didn't go well at all. Like, what's like, let me share what my story is. And doing just that opens up so much possibility, like a higher level of communication opportunity, and a higher level of leading and collaboration. So
Yeah. But it's hard. It's actually, as you were just concluding this, I was thinking that we're so much on an auto mode that we probably don't even realize that we are creating a narrative, we are creating a story, and if we do, we believe in it so much that we're not even willing to, either we believe in it, so we think it's obvious that the other person also has the same story, which is not true at all,
right,
or we're too afraid to actually be vulnerable and share what our thoughts are. Somehow, we oscillate between these 2 points.
right,
And which one was
right.
for you when you started out?
So like for me, the question was, and this is where I think the idea of conscious leadership and mindset mastery, which is necessary for conscious leadership, come in, because you're basically saying, and I realized that. So the way I realized that conscious leadership matters was that I had this one boss at some point where he was like one of those people who is extremely smart, completely stuck in his head, but also he was very emotional, and he didn't realize how emotional he was. He was also very, into power, and I'm sure he did realize how into power he was, but he was completely unaware of the impact that he has on people. At least I hope so, because otherwise he was a very evil man, or he would have been a very evil. But I think he was truly unaware. And at one point we had this very interesting conversation during breakfast at a leadership retreat, where we were eating our croissants and sipping coffee, and he looks at me and he's like, Mickey, you really, really intimidate me. And this was a guy who was creating tension between his subordinates that were reporting to him. He was setting up people to compete with each other, but not in a good way, but more
Political.
so that, yeah, he would like politically divide people. And everybody was terrified of the guy. Like, intimidation was his name. That was his name, Mr. Intimidation. And he's telling me, the young, guy, 30 something, he's like 15 years or 10 to 12 years older than me, like, you really intimidate me. And I realized at that moment, which is when I forgave, I actually forgave him, because I realized that I think he doesn't know, like, he's such an unconscious leader. Like, he thinks he's very conscious, and in terms of squeezing people and the objectives, and being nice up and being hard down, he is conscious, but I don't think he truly realizes his effect on people. And I just sat there and I said, like, I'm learning so much from this guy, but the one thing I don't want to learn from him is his complete unawareness of his true impact on other people, and what is the cost of that to the organization. Because, he was successful, but he created a lot of pain. And I think the like, so if there's a way to, I was fascinated, like, if there is a way to maybe create a lot of results and be successful, but not create any pain, and maybe even be more ambitious than just not, like, my ambition in this conversation with you is not to not hurt you. It's a little bit more than that. It's more like, let's create something interesting, let's create something that people want to listen to, right? So so if there is a way to be conscious and care about our impact and yet be successful, then what is that way? So that's how I started being very interested in, because I was always very ambitious and hard charging as well, and wanted to be successful, but I didn't want to do it at the cost of hurting people or making, creating pain for others. So I was very, I honestly, I was coming from the performance point of view at the beginning, and then, okay, loose, like, be more loose. So then things opened up even more for me. But the initial question was just, how do I get the best out of people, and in a way that is sustainable, and we have fun, and we like doing this together? What's the way for that?
That's I can relate so much to this, because I think that was the kind of leadership that was there back then, some 20, 25 years ago, 30 years ago. I don't blame that generation somehow. They messed up a bit with us,
Yeah.
but it's across the board, right? It's in parenting, and it's in leadership, and I know the best, and I'm doing the right thing, and somehow they just weren't probably aware of whatever else was going on. And so yeah, so I've gone through that. I'm just wondering, because this is a tough one, right? uh, to create a sustainable model that is both performance driven, which is why most companies obviously uh, work, and sustainable, but at the same time making life, you know, not just a tad bit, but 180 degrees different, and but for the better for the people who work for you. Because I've seen people take advantage of that in my own personal life. And when I was younger, I questioned myself because I felt that this style is not going to work. The values that I have is not going to work. And I had a lot of early conversations with myself. I said, well, I can't change this. I don't want to change this. And this is who I am. And if I change this, I won't be a manager in the first place. Uh, but it was a very, very um, tough few years, especially in my first decade of my own work. How did that go for you?
Yeah, I think, like the big aha moment for me was when it was one of my bosses that said to me this. And at the time when he said it, I didn't understand. So um, I think we were just walking through an office, and I was opening and closing doors and, like putting my bag somewhere when we arrived in the meeting room, and like setting up my computer. And he was watching me. And what I felt at the moment was that I'm very efficient. So I push the door in, I come into the room, I get to the table, I put down my computer, open it up. I was like, wow, I'm full
All
of
the time that
energy.
you know,
Yeah,
I'm here
yeah,
announcing it.
yeah. And
Yeah,
he's like watching me, and he's like, Mickey, if you're not gentle in your mind, if you're not flexible in your mind and with yourself, you can't be flexible with others. And I was like, what the hell are you talking about? I don't understand. I'm the young star. And eventually, so I began to understand that the way I treat myself, like another friend was telling me that, we were in a Turkish bath. So sometimes it's such a, like out of context situation in a Turkish bath, soaking in water for 3 hours, coming out of the Turkish bath, and then applying some lotion. And he's like, man, when you apply your lotion, you look like you're making a sculpture. You're like so intentional about it, and so I could never do anything, like in a sort of like relaxed, playful fashion. It always had to be like fucking perfect, right? And so beginning to understand that the way I treat myself, that's the way I treat others. So
yeah,
so how do I so interestingly or paradoxically, you have to start yourself a little better, with a little more compassion, with a little more looseness. And as you begin to do that, you realize what you're doing to other people, and somehow you become a little more compassionate and empathetic and understanding. And it doesn't mean that you're no longer interested in performance. It actually means that the way I figured I was holding myself back from reaching my full potential was exactly being a slave runner of my own self.
yeah,
And and as soon as I stopped doing that, and started to treat myself, you know, in better ways, this has actually transformed the way I was having a conversation with someone else, or the amount of patience that I had with someone else. And I think it's a big balancing act. And you're right in pointing out that it's kind of very hard, because it feels like those are competing with each other. But the main point is that they don't. They actually don't. It's actually, if I want to follow somebody, then I will do a better job. if I don't want to follow somebody, but I have to, I might still do a really good job, but it will never be comparable to my full potential. Never.
Never be optimum.
Yes.
Uh, and I'm picking up the two words that you use, and I calmness, calm, and patience, right? And I'm reminded of, actually it was, I had forgotten about the story, but this reminded me of that. Um, so back in the day, I taught at a undergraduate level as a
Hmm.
faculty. So we used to have evening classes, and we would have a break. And Muslims pray at the sunset, so we'd have a sunset prayer break, and uh, typically, sometimes I'd lead the prayer. So that one day I was leading prayer, and
Mm.
I was like loud, and I was harsh. Right? It was, "A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim." So it's coming out like really loud and really harsh.
Yeah.
So we pray, and when the prayer ends, this guy in the first row behind me, also a teacher, probably 10 years older than I was at that point in time, comes up to me and says, very gently, puts his hand on me and says, "What are you angry about?
Mm.
You know,
Right.
just uh, you're just talking to God, right?" And I said, "No, this is being loud. No, you all right?" But there was an anger,
Mm.
and I kept
Mm.
on thinking, what made him think that I'm so angry? But I was, and I never realized that until I went into my personal development and my therapy and all the work that I underwent. But yes, it is about being gentle with yourself first, and that will show up in so it's a lot of conversations. And if you're not gentle with yourself,
Yeah.
it will show up the way your your boss's attitude, that early boss that you talked about, that will show up. Yeah. But at the same time, I was also thinking about this beautiful thing that you said. You talked about not just, not in my interpretation, not just not harming me, but growing with me, or
Yeah.
mutually, or as a whole growing together. And that sounded very beautiful. And how did, because most people are stuck on this part, right?
Yeah.
I'll just not harm you, right? But I feel that's not ecological.
Yeah. It's
That's,
it's 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 very interesting. Yeah. Lots of thoughts come to my mind as you say that. Like one thing I came to mind was when you said about speaking the way you spoke during prayer, and the guy asking you, what are you angry about, and I sort of intuitively sense that you were angry about yourself, right? Like so usually that's where this is coming from. And I had an amazing mentor. So I had a few big mentors in my life, but one um, of my mentors is a Canadian Hungarian psycho. I wouldn't call him psychoanalyst. He's a therapist, and he's a very special guy. But he always said, his what he told me was that your ambition should be that you don't want anything from your patient. You don't want anything from your patient, and you just take their money in a good way. So he's like, that's the only thing you want, that they have to pay for the session, but not because you want to make money of them, but because that should be the only thing. Otherwise, you must have no desires, no expectations, no goals that you impose on the other person, because what they need to understand is how is it to be with someone else and just be. And you just have to be curious, you just have to be open, and you mustn't have any ambition, any goal for your patient. And as much as it kind of sounds very interesting, it always bothered me a little bit. And then like when I when I was learning meditation, in meditation they say you must have no intention for the session. Like you shouldn't want to have enlightenment. You shouldn't seek anything. Just be. And I always thought that, like, this is an oxymoron, because not wanting anything is a want. Like, my intention is to not want anything. That's an intention. Come on. So so for me, it was like, I can't make my intention, my only intention, or my main intention, for us to not hurt each other, because it somehow doesn't feel like it's enough. And what if we just looked at it in a way that we can teach something to each other, like in this conversation, in any conversation in life, right? Like, there is something to learn. And basically, a friend or a community, the definition of that is that we can learn something together.
Yeah.
So if we can communicate, like, okay, if we can communicate in a way that we're learning, if we can create a community in our company, in our team, so that we are growing together and learning together, then it's a true community. And 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 it's ecological, and we want to be here because we are growing together. And sometimes, by the way, because maybe the people listening to us, they're thinking, okay, so he's talking about, that is going to be great all the time, and it's going to be fun all the time, and it's going to be nice and pleasant, and we are not going to go through any hardship. No, growing together, there's this expression, growing pain. So I actually happen to think that our whole entire industry, the whole personal development industry, not the whole, but a lot of us, no, people are lying about this, because they're saying, okay, if you do these three things, you're done.
Oh
you
yes.
you, like, now you're going to be happy. Today you're, and now you're going to be reaching your full potential. Three things, seven things, that's it. No, it's going to be, I think it's a lie. It's
It
hard
is. It
to
is.
grow, right?
It is. It's. I actually feel very offended. By the way, and you just stepped on a very, very, very. It's a very painful nerve for me. Just just stepped on it because uh, I think we've sometimes talked about it during one of the trainings. It's because uh, the way it works, especially because I do a lot of NLP training and a lot of emotional intelligence training, and hopefully this year mindset maps and mindset school as well. Uh, uh, the one thing that when I started out, the program. So when I was scanning the market, the program advertisements that I always saw, and I still see that, reach your full potential, change your mind, change your life. I've been guilty of something like that as well. But um, those promises that these 15 days are going to, just rewire your brain, no, it's not going to happen. A, it needs your intention, the most important thing. And B, as you said, it's a process. My first guest who came in on this podcast, he used the term micro shifts. It happens, very, 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 very minuscule scale. You just don't even realize. And so in the industry that we work, yes, it's read my book, life is going to change. 7-step formula, it's going to change this, and so on. But that reminds me, you have a 7-step formula, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, but it doesn't. I mean, it's not the solution to every problem. It's like your contribution to how you see it, and it will work with a lot of people, but it needs a lot of work before, during, and after that as well. And that's
First of
that's the
Yeah.
industry. Yeah.
No, I was just gonna say that you said that I stepped on something, then, and it hurts. And I don't know how exactly you mean it, but I would say, first of all, I want to acknowledge that that happened, right? And sometimes when somebody says something to me, I feel the same way, like, that hit, it's pushing a point where there's some pain. And it's in our practice, we like to welcome that, like, oh, that's interesting. Oh, so why do we feel that way? And what I thought of was, the other thing was the idea of a bus. So it does matter what kind of bus you're going to get on, right? It certain buses go this place to this place, other buses go to another place. It also matters, what kind of bus, like the build of the bus and what's inside, and the brand, the make, the quality. It matters who is driving the bus.
Yeah, I was going
And
to say
so,
that the
right.
driver certainly. Yeah,
Big time. And so,
yeah,
like, finding the right bus to get on is important. But just because you got on the bus, you can get off the bus anytime. And basically, what happens in a program or a training. So let's say you get on the right bus. It's a really great driver. It's a great, community of passengers, and something really happens, and you get somewhere where you wanted to get. But then you get off, the journey is over, and now you have to find that bus again and again and get back on it. And that's
yeah.
where your habits began to, play into the game. And in our process, we have 7 steps. And so, like, the first step is just being conscious of that inner state, that mindset that we started our conversation with. And then the second step is just to be able to zoom out and realize that you are potentially the narrator of your life. It's your choice. And then, okay, so what's that story? And then, once that narrative, is more or less, or let's say a little bit more clear, you have a first progression. Then you have to have a bunch of habits that sustain you, and so you're not get lost, and you have enough feedback, and you're positive and you're energized. And then you have this, like, ongoing daily level of practice of juggling all those hats that you have to juggle every day, which is kind of your third step. And then the question is, okay, so now that this is all clear, where am I going? What's my most important focus? So I have to figure that out, because that's kind of in addition to now being a, in a better way
Mm.
of relationship with yourself. And then we say, okay, so then there is something that you're fighting. Like, maybe you were angry, and I got that feedback at some point. A therapist said to me, like, well, what were you so angry about, Mickey? And I got so angry when she said that. I was, you idiot. What?
I've been
So
there, angry about being angry.
yeah, that's
Yeah,
right. So it took me 20 years to understand, what I'm angry about. But that doesn't mean that. So we have these steps, and they're amazing, and get on the bus with us, and go through it, and it can potentially change your life for a little while, maybe for 2 weeks, maybe for a month, maybe for 6 months, unless you're willing to practice every day. If you're willing to practice every day, it will change your life forever, but not because of the, I mean, partially because the process is the right process, but very much so because you are now in charge, and you are playing this inner game that is on a much higher level than you have ever played it before.
yeah, that's scary for a lot of people. But I think you, as long as you do understand that you ultimately have to play with the big boys, right? And that ambition is there, right? You start playing, in the streets, just passing the ball, and just being there, and slowly your legs and your body and your head starts to come together. But most people would be scared to actually think. I was in a conversation, and someone said that, do I even deserve to be here? And my question, of course, was that how do you know that you deserve it or you don't? right? Because those are the assumptions. But I'll tell you the pain point that that you touched, and the nerve
Mm,
is that uh, I've been lucky. I've been very lucky because I got some amazing trainers, right? Um, Everyone who I've trained with has been outstanding. Even the ones that I mean, obviously I can rate some of them, right? But even the ones that I would not put at number one and number two, right? They'd still make it to some amazing trainers, right? None of them was even average. So it's like first among equals kind of things. Uh, but what I'm really getting into is that uh, I've seen you, and I've seen Robert, and I've seen Judy, and I've seen Robbie Steinhaus, and I've seen my own NLP trainer Alia. And there were never false promises of my course is going to just magically transform you. Now, transformation is there. That's a good buzzword to have, and like the marketing buzzword to use in our industry. But promising that this is the only thing that you need, I think we do that oversell, and I think that's a lie that we do. Uh, Selling dreams of perfection that really actually isn't even the purpose of who we are, right? We are beautiful in our imperfection. That's what makes you different than me, and that's what makes us beautiful as a species, right? We're not the same lions with the same kinds of skins and the same kind of color, and we're not the same zebras with the same kind of stripes and whites and blacks. We're all very different, and that's the beauty, right? But we all sell, and then what happens is that in our industry, when we sell these things, um, we get very unethical sometimes because we are not really looking at how the hand holding works, and how after that you actually take those people through that other stages of transformation. Because one of my mentors taught me that real coaching happens after the session. So real transformation happens once the course is over, or not. That's input time, right? So that's the pain, the nerve that you touched by.
mm.
So yeah,
No,
yeah,
I can absolutely relate to that. Yeah, there is something like a relief where when you say, I'm the coach, but I'm not responsible for the change. And ultimately it's always the coachee who
yeah.
needs to take responsibility for the change for in their life. But in a way, when we work together, we are sharing that responsibility for a while. And so there's going to be a bunch of invitations and a bunch of opportunities and a bunch of experiences that we can create as coaches and trainers and facilitators and moderators. And so but the people will have to decide. It's their choice to what extent are they willing to take the invitation, and then to what extent are they willing to walk the talk later. And so in a way, I think it should be a relief, but it doesn't mean that we're not responsible for creating the best possible process and structure and experience. And every time we don't ask ourselves, okay, how can we do better? I mean, we must have done, I don't know, uh, 20, 25 mindset maps, um, coach certifications, and I don't know how many mindset mastery schools. But every time the question is, okay, so how can we do better, right? So that's the whole point. Is that if you're a conscious leader, it doesn't mean that you don't care about performance. It's just that the things are in the right place. Because if I assume all of the responsibility for the coachee, and I think that it's my job to change them. If as a leader I assume that I have to know everything. I have to have the answer for everything. I have to be better than all my people because I am responsible for their performance. Well, you are ultimately responsible as a leader for the performance of the unit, but you are responsible for creating the conditions so that they can bring their best performance. That's what you're responsible for. And that's a
100%.
isn't that a much more empowering
100%. 100%. I think the real thing is that instead of saying that my program will transform you, it is about my program will help you get the agency to step into the transformation yourself. There's one mantra that I
Mm,
yesterday I was training in my NLP class, and someone said, how do I do this? I said, you need to get those prayer beads, and you need to read this 100 times a day. And the statement was, I'm only responsible for myself, and only I'm responsible for myself. Right? And you have to understand that you have to have agency, and by selling a dream where you're not willing to give them the agency, and putting it that way, that I can't take the responsibility for you can't take my responsibility as a participant, and neither can I think that's where the when you mentioned the lie part, that's where what I meant, that you're not you're selling an illusion, but not telling them that you have to have the agency. It's not attending the classes, it's embodiment of all that has to go on. So yeah, that's the point. you you've been to the mountains, Tibet and Nepal.
yes,
How was
Tibet,
that?
Tibet
Yeah,
only. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
What?
It was amazing. And I just wanted to tell you, maybe before I say something about Tibet, just one quick thing. Um, Twice, I think, in the last 2 months, it happened to me when a business leader came to me and said, "Mickey, I wanted to praise somebody. I wanted to make them feel good about something, and instead, it turned out." And they didn't learn this from the people that they wanted to lift up. They learned it from third parties, and it turned out that both of those people felt embarrassed, even insulted. So this is what we are talking about, right? Like, that's why conscious leadership is a choice, because first of all, some leaders do this and never find out, right? um, some leaders do this and find out and don't know what to do. And
Yeah,
then so a conscious leader is, all I'm doing is I'm assuming responsibility for the ultimate impact I have on other people. And if the impact that lands doesn't align with the objectives which I set, then I have to care and I have to figure out how to land it better. So that's why, again, mindset, conscious leadership is so key. And it was interesting when we went to Tibet. So my expectation was that I'm going to walk into Wonderland, and everybody is enlightened, and these are going to be sort of these masters, because we saw like 9 or 10 masters. Somebody took us around. We spent like, I don't know, 6 weeks there. And so I was hoping that's what I thought that would happen, and I would come back completely a different person. And it was amazing. It was unbelievable. We met some people, and I'm still living from some of the things that I've learned from that and practicing that every day. On my phone, I have, one of them, their picture is my fire, uh, is on my, what do you call it, on the first page. Yeah.
the wallpaper. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. The wallpaper. Yeah. So that's him. I don't know if you can. So
I
anyway, it was amazing. And the biggest learning was that um, almost all of them said, "Guys, why did you come here? You should just stay where you are and practice. Like, don't come over to this. magic land and expect that here you're a different person and here somebody's going to say something that's going to change your life. You already have everything inside you, just practice. So so, so that was sort of amazing to realize that the gold is hidden in the garden, in the backyard at home. And
Yeah.
the other interesting thing that was amazing was that we realized that some of the 10 people that we saw, and I'm going to be very harsh, like one or two of them were assholes, enlightened assholes. And I never thought that there is such a thing. So you can be of such level of inner, like you have reached such a level of consciousness, and you can say things that blows people's minds, and you can still be like harsh and like rough with people and even insult them. So sort of like your humanity, it's still playing, and you still remain human. You're on a different level of consciousness, and maybe there was differences between those people, and those people were, but they were regarded as some of the biggest masters. And yet, and then you began to ask yourself the question, so when they were harsh with us, or they wouldn't see us, or they would send us away, or they sounded, was it part of the
Training.
path, the training? And maybe it was, right? So that's sort of enigma in our heads, like, yeah, these guys are assholes, like, why did we come here, like? And
Yeah.
then maybe, oh, maybe that's teaching us something. And so, yeah, that was truly amazing.
Yeah. It's again, whatever they were, ultimately it is also the meaning and the way your mindset works in terms of how you process and how you ultimately turn that out to the world, right?
Exactly.
So from spirituality, from all of these spiritual experiences, you still do a lot of work with the corporate and with the corporate leaders, and the conscious leadership. Uh, did you find that in any way dichotomous, because there's a lot of corporate work is very materialistic, and then this is very spiritual. So how did that pan out?
So for me, my purpose is to open my mind and heart and wings every day as I help other people to do so. And so all of this is about changing my personal history at the beginning, and then helping others to change that. And ultimately, I just realized, this goes back to this idea of ending the suffering. So it's very hard to end the suffering, and maybe it's the basic condition of life, as the Buddhists say. But I still would love to help to end my own suffering. I don't want to make myself suffer. That's one of my goals. And then I want to help other people not to make them suffer themselves. And then I want to help them not to make other people suffer from their actions. So ending the suffering, and there's so much suffering, and everybody thinks that, okay, suffering, so struggle and suffering is not the same thing. It
Yeah.
could be hard, but I could still enjoy it. I could still be in flow. I could still feel appreciated. And for me, everybody is in the best place. I ultimately believe, to help the people that there once was. So I was once a corporate guy, for like 15 years of my life, and I know that world intimately inside out. And it is a changing world, but I'm still engaging with it all the time through the coaching and training that I do. And I just feel called to help, because I think there's so much help that's possible, and there is so much call for help. So people are, like, a lot of people are wondering, like, how can I do this right? How can I do this better? How can I build a community where we are growing together? How can I achieve my goals, and not at the expense of burning my people out? And you know how can I do it better? So for me, whenever I meet somebody who is called to do that and they're in the corporate world, I light up because that's where I come from as well. And I want to help. Yeah. And it's exciting. So that's kind of, I don't know if I answered the question, but that's what
Yeah, yeah,
came to me.
yeah, yeah. It makes a lot of sense. I think the key pick from this one was that, I loved it, that everyone is in a position to help other people from the same place where they were once, right? And
Yeah.
I think that's really what we are all about, right? That, we've had this experience, and, Mickey, can I give you some help so that you can, maneuver around this experience and have a better part, or moment or day, because, there was someone to tell you what lies ahead. So yeah, and one last thing: how do you find the right bus, and how do you keep finding the right bus?
The right person, meaning,
The right bus. You talked about the bus, the driver, the whole thing,
right.
but yeah,
Hmm.
how do you find the
Ah,
right bus? How do you keep finding it?
yeah. Yeah. That's a very interesting question. I think it's, in our profession, they always say you have to say it's a really good question, and then it gives you time to think. Yeah. So no, but it is truly a really good question. So for me, it comes down to this simple idea that, okay, so we started this by saying, okay, the art of running your brain and the body mind is a system, and the head and the heart and the gut, and those three kinds of nervous systems are having to work together in a triage, in a trio, to be effective. And I think very often where we go wrong is that, you're trying to select with your head only, or you're trying to select with your heart only, or you're trying to select with your gut only, and each of them can lead you down the rabbit hole. I had a really good feeling, but I didn't think it through. Or I really love the guy, but I had this feeling that, I love him, but maybe they don't have this that I need. Or I did my, due diligence, and I checked every angle, and, calculated every number, but at the end we just didn't connect. So I think bringing those three systems into awareness, and trying to use it, and run it through each time you make a decision which bus to get on. Okay, so here, does it align? Here, does it align? And then down there, does it align? And if all three aligns, that's usually a very strong indication that that's the right choice for you. And I do believe in the power of intuition, a big deal. Just because we seem to, like, neuroscience claims that we're unaware of 90 to 97% of what's truly going on in our system. So in this way, the brain is really this, like, valve that is like a funnel that
Uh,
makes the amount of noise digestible so that we can actually survive. So if that's true, then intuition is really interesting, because that's the one place where you can tap into the 90x% that you're unaware of. And sometimes there is something there to really pay attention. And you still check here and here, but I think the gut is very interesting.
yeah, yeah, and ultimately, uh, creating that symphony between the gut and the heart and the mind, and really setting them for success for us. So I think we're slightly above time. It's, interesting conversations always, they keep going on. So what, we are now at the end. Um, Anything that how what is it that you would say to your future self today as we end this conversation? What
Anything
would
I
you
would say
to
as
your future?
to my future self
Yeah.
from here? Hmm. It's like it's so interesting. Like when you said the question, immediately what came to me is that there's no future self,
Yeah,
and my future self is here right now in
correct.
this room,
Yeah,
right? And I'm creating him, them, right, as we speak.
yeah,
So pay attention to the now, pay attention to the here and now. That's what
yeah,
I would say.
yeah. That's beautiful. Thank you very much, Mickey, for making time. I know it was early morning for you, 10 a.m., but it's still early from a lot of perspectives.
No, not
So
so much. Yeah, it was a pleasure. Always a pleasure, Adnan. And I like I love your curious mind. And, I really appreciate the initiative that you're taking to create shifts. So wishing you a lot of energy. And I know that we'll be collaborating in some of this. So I look forward to that.
yes, all right. I'll see you. Bye bye.
See you and see everyone else.
Bye.